Welcome everyone to another video session of free answer writing practice by Vajiram and Ravi. In this month, we are going to do GS2 syllabus where we are going to focus on prelims concept. Let us see the timetable and understand how exactly we are going to focus on prelim concept. Well, we have seen that how there are certain syllabus similarity with prelims and mains. Over here for mains answer writing, we are going to use the prelims concepts for mains answer writing so that you can prepare both your answer writing practice as well as prepare for the fundamentals for the prelims. In today, we are going to delve into Union and its territory for 9th of January. Let us see what exactly the questions that we are going to do. The very first question is with respect to the constitution and how we have single citizenship, and for the same there are certain ways of acquiring and losing the Indian citizenship. So over here we will see the factual information about ways of acquiring and losing the Indian citizenship. In the second question, we are going to see there are two categories of individual, citizens and aliens. We will understand the difference between the same and how the constitution provides for different provisions for the same. And the last question over here, we are going to see that how there were various commissions instituted by the government of India for state reorganization, and we will focus on the recommendation put forward by the Faisal Ali Commission. So these are the three questions that we are going to see today. Let us start with the very first question. Let's read the very first question together. Though the Indian Constitution is federal, it provides for only a single citizenship, that is the Indian citizenship. In light of the statement, explain the ways of acquiring and losing Indian citizenship. Now, this is a very straightforward and a direct question. As we can see in the introduction, we will talk about that, what exactly it means by the fact that we have only single citizenship, the Indian citizenship. In the body, we have two major demands. We will talk about ways of acquiring, which will be the heading 1, and ways of losing. And in the conclusion, over here, we have the opportunity to talk about it, how the idea of citizenship is also dynamic and changing with course of time. So that is something we will write in the conclusion. Let us start with the introduction. Over here, you can talk about the meaning. Well, even though the Indian Constitution is federal, as in we have union government as well as state government, we only have single citizenship, that is Indian citizenship, and no state citizenship. So that is reflected from the constitutional provisions of Part 2 citizenship, where we have Article 5 to 11 talking about the citizenship. We also have Citizenship Act of 1955, which lay down rules and regulations with respect to acquiring and losing Indian citizenship. So let us see the body aspect, where we will be talking about the same in detailed manner. First heading, we will talk about the acquisition of citizenship. We have 5 ways through which we can acquire the citizenship. The very first is by birth. We have certain criterias based on the timeline, and for the same we can talk about it how for people born between 1950 and 87, irrespective of parents' nationality, by birth they can acquire the citizenship of India. For people who are born between 87, which are born after 87 till 2004, we have requirement of at least one parent to be Indian citizen, and post 2004, both parents must be Indian citizen or one parent must be not an illegal immigrant. So that is something we can talk about for citizenship acquired by birth. For by descent, which is applied to the person born outside of India with Indian national parents. Over here we can talk about that how pre-1992, as in 1950 to 1992, the person should have Indian citizen as the father. Then post 1992, single person, as in any one parent can be Indian citizen at the time of the birth, and post 2004 we have seen that how registration at Indian consulate within 1 year must be done for citizenship by descent. So that is all for by birth and by descent. Let us see the third method, which is by registration. Over here we have to understand that person of Indian origin must reside in India for at least 7 years. Or we can also talk about it is resident of undivided Indian and married to an Indian citizen. We have also certain different criteria for minors and adult, where one parent is Indian, and overseas citizens who are eligible for the same. The fourth process is by naturalization. Over here, we have to see that ordinary resident, that person must reside in India for 12 years, must have good character, and acquire knowledge for the language specified in 8th schedule. And lastly, by incorporation of territory, we have seen that foreign territory become part of India. Government may specify individuals from that territory who can become Indian citizens. For example, citizenship Pondicherry order. So the fifth method also prescribes for acquisition of Indian citizenship. Now let us see the heading 2, where we will directly cater the second demand, which is losing the Indian citizenship. We have understood that there are 3 explicit ways through which you can lose the Indian citizenship. Firstly is renunciation. If any Indian citizen who renounces the citizenship through declaration can lose the Indian citizenship. There are certain exceptions where minors can lose the citizenship with parent but can regain again at the age of 18. Then the second way is termination. Citizenship automatically gets terminated if that person willingly acquires another country's citizenship, except during wartime. So we do understand that Indian citizenship is a very exclusive one. So you cannot acquire another at the same time. So if you acquire another country's citizenship, you might lose the India's citizenship as well. The third is deprivation. Over here, central government can terminate citizenship based on certain reasons such as frauds, disloyalty, unlawful communication with the enemy during wartime. So these are the kind of deprivations that can lead to loss of Indian citizenship. So these are the ways through which you can acquire and lose Indian citizenship. In the conclusion, you can talk about it how Citizenship Act of 1955 is a dynamic document, and at the same time you can talk about it how it is making sure that the idea of citizenship is evolving with time for the nation. So that is something you can write in the conclusion of this question. So that is all for question number 1. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, you can talk about the idea of citizenship in the constitution as in part 2 of the same, and then you can talk about the Citizenship Act, which have explicit idea with respect to the ways of acquiring and losing citizenship. Then in the heading 1, you can talk about the acquisition of citizenship. You can list down the 5 ways and the provisions for the same. And the next heading is loss of citizenship, where you can talk about the ways of how a person can lose the citizenship over here. And in the conclusion, you can talk about the dynamic nature of the citizenship in India through the Act. So that is all for question number 1. Let us start with question number 2. Let's read the question together. Similar to any other modern state, India comprises 2 categories of individual, citizens and aliens. Highlight the difference between the citizens and aliens. So the question is again very straightforward. We do have understanding that any resident that India caters are of 2 categories. Firstly, they are citizens or they are aliens. So in the introduction itself, you can briefly introduce the meaning of citizen and alien. You can draw a diagram to understand the difference between the same. There are aliens also are categorized into further 2 friendly and enemy aliens, where again their rights are different. Now in the body, we have to talk about the difference between the citizens and aliens. So in the body part, we will be talking about how exactly citizens are treated differently than aliens and vice versa. So that is something which is the direct demand of the body. And in the conclusion, we can talk about that this kind of distinction is created to ensure that there is balance between the inclusive governance at the same time for national security. So that is something over here for the question number 2. The structure is, we have already understood the introduction is going to be about briefly meaning of the citizen and alien, where citizens are those category of people who are specifically given the status of citizenship and have certain elaborated rights, versus those alien who are not exactly the citizen of the nation, but despite the same, they have certain rights as well. So let us start with the body part, where will we talk about the differences between the citizens and aliens. Firstly, with respect to the fundamental rights, we have seen that in the overall pool of fundamental rights, the aliens are only allotted Article 14, 20, 21A and 21 to 28 rights. and they are not provided rights such as 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30, which are exclusive for the citizens. So that is something with respect to fundamental rights over here. We have seen that they are accorded different status. Then with respect to political rights, we have understood that citizens can vote and stand for election, while non-citizens, they are excluded from the electoral process. For the government jobs also, we have seen that there is affirmative action in place where government jobs are reserved for the citizens and non-citizens may be restricted from specific government positions. With respect to legal protection, we have seen that how citizens have broader access to legal protection and remedies through judicial system. And for the same time, when we talk about citizenship rights, we have seen that citizens can claim protection and privilege of Indian citizen, including the right to passport, whereas the non-citizens lack this kind of right. So this is the basic distinction between the citizens and alien. So this question was pretty much straightforward. I hope you understand from this question you have to learn about the prelims concepts such as what are the kind of rights that citizens have and what are the kind of rights that alien as in non-citizens do not have. So that was the basic fundamental thing that you have to learn from this kind of questions. In the conclusion, you can talk about that this kind of distinction is basically to make sure that there is balance between inclusive growth, as in everyone is included with respect to the welfare, and at the same time there is protection of national interest, to ensure that the citizens who have made sure their loyalty is in place with the nation. So that is something accorded through the kind of rights they are given, and they are distinct with the non-citizens' right to ensure that the national interest is at the center. So that is something you can write in the conclusion. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. So for the introduction, you can talk about what exactly are the citizens and how exactly they differ from the aliens. Over here, you can talk about the segregation as we have done the same in the form of a flowchart. You can similarly write the same and help it make it explicit for understanding. Lastly, you can talk about that how there are certain different kind of aliens as well. So that is something you can inculcate in the introduction. In the body, there is only one heading over here. You can talk about the differences between citizens and aliens. You can list down those differences along with the substantiation. And in the conclusion, you can talk about that despite that kind of distinction, there are certain reasons underlying the same, and that is because of the balance between inclusive growth and national interest. Over here, you can also talk about that how citizens, they are also prescribe certain kind of fundamental duties which they have to follow, whereas non-citizens, they do not have such kind of prescriptions, as in they do not have certain kind of duties that they need to follow. So this is the kind of distinction you can talk about for this question. Let's start with question number 3. Let's read the question together. Examine the various commissions instituted by the Government of India for state reorganization with a particular emphasis on the recommendation put forward by Fazal Ali Commission. So we have understood that the reorganization and consolidation of the Indian polity has been pretty much dynamic since the independence. So you can start with the introduction. You can talk about it. What was the scenario before the reorganization? Because the timeline, if you see, we have 1950 where this kind of setup was made explicit through constitution. Then in 1956, we witnessed a major change with respect to the state and their nomenclature and everything. And post that, we have seen that how that the reorganization and consolidation has been a continuous process. For this question, in the introduction, you can talk about what was the scenario before the major reorganization took place. You can talk about what was the constitutional provisions. We can talk about it how there were 4 type of categories: Part A, Part B, Part C and Part D with different kind of units. Then in the body, you can talk about what were the major commissions. You can talk about the 3 major commissions and talk about the recommendation and the reaction from the government. Then in the heading 2, this is with respect to the heading 1. Then in the heading 2, you can give emphasis on the recommendation put forward by the Fazal Ali Commission and talk about how exactly it led to major reorganization of the state. And in the conclusion, lastly, you can talk about it how the reorganization and consolidation is a continuous dynamic process. So that is all for question number 3, structuring. In the introduction, as I mentioned, we will talk about the state and how exactly the situation was before reorganization. So over here, as we talked about that, you can talk about that the constitution provided for 4 different parts and category of the regions, and they were basically divided like this. This is something you can give it out in a simple form. In the body, you can talk about the various commissions instituted by the government of India for state reorganization. Now, this is the heading 1 over here. You can list down different commissions. You can talk about the recommendation and reaction by the government. Firstly, we have Dhar Commission of 1948, where it proposed for state reorganization for administrative efficiency and not linguistic consideration. Now, the reaction for the same was discontent, and it led to creation of Linguistic Provision Committee, that is GVP Committee 1949, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel and Pattabhi Sitaramaya. Over here, the recommendation was again rejected, the language as basis for the state reorganization, and despite rejection of this kind of committee, we witnessed the creation of Andhra state based on linguistic lines in 1953. Now for the same, to make sure that the other aspirations are also realized, another committee was formed, Faisal Ali Commission of 1953, which responded to the demand after Andhra state was created. This was led by Faisal Ali, K.M. Panikkar and H.N. Kunzru. Now, as the demand 2 of the question is to give emphasis on the recommendation of Faisal Ali Commission, we will put out in a very separate heading over here. You can talk about of the recommendation at the first. You can talk about how it acknowledged language as a crucial but rejected one language, one state idea. Over here, it emphasized on unity, linguistic and cultural homogeneity, financial consideration for administration and welfare promotion. And it proposed 16 states and 13 centrally administrative territories. Now, in the reaction for this kind of committee's recommendation, government enacted the State Reorganization Act of 1956, and at the same time, it amended Constitution, that was 7th Constitutional Amendment Act in 1956, which abolished the 4-part segregation and led to a different kind of structure where we had 14 states and 6 union territories. So this was the kind of recommendation and its reaction by the government with respect to the state reorganization. In the conclusion, you can talk about that how reorganization and consolidation has been ongoing process. We witnessed the recent formation of Telangana over here in 2014. So that is something which says that since 1950s till the latest, we have seen a lot of reorganization within the nation. So that talks about the idea that this is still a dynamic and ongoing process. So that is all for question number 3's conclusion. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, in the introduction, you can talk about the state which was present in 1950. Then you can talk about that because of certain resistance, certain demand, there were certain commissions in place to ensure that they can understand the need for such reorganization. You can talk about different commissions and the recommendation and the reaction as well. And you can conclude the answer by talking about that how the reorganization and consolidation is ongoing and a dynamic process. So that is all for question number 3 and today's session. So please keep writing and thank you so much.